Didn't know my own strength. How many of you can relate to that? You know, it's kind of the way life works, that we don't know what we have within us and what we're capable of. Sometimes we don't really know what we're made of until we're faced with something that causes us to need to discover it, right? That you have to come into contact with it and cultivate it, and you just didn't even know it was there until something happened and you needed to be able to bring it out in a part of your experience. So it is with life. That echoes what we're talking about today. This month, the month of September, we are exploring the idea of the ways we experience God, realizing that every individual's experience of that which we call God is their experience. And no one can tell you that your experience is not the right one or not your experience, because if it's your experience, it is your experience. And so we're looking at the many ways we experience God, and in particular this month we're going to be focusing on what it means to understand God as the great operating system of the universe. But before that, let's just do a quick little recap of some of the ways that we experience that which we call God. And just for a test, is there anybody that when I say the word God makes you a little uncomfortable? If you'd be willing to be honest and raise your hand. Okay, just look around. Is there anybody when I say the word Jesus makes you uncomfortable? Anybody, if I refer to God as divine principle or law, does that seem just really kind of strange? To a few, yeah. And so see, that's a beautiful representation of the different ways we can relate and understanding the importance of not being so attached to our languaging around that. So the ways we experience God, the first one is our ideas or our concepts, that as it is with anything, we all have our own ideas and our own concepts. And it's like I told this last week, the little Sunday school class teacher who asked her young class, how many of you believe in God? Every hand went up. Why do you believe in God? No hand went up. And finally one sheepishly went up and she said, yes, why do you believe in God? And the little guy said, well, I believe it runs in my family, that our ideas about what we call God come from somewhere. And so we all have our ideas. Now, the thing about ideas, though, the scriptures tell us not to make God into an image or an idol. The scripture uses the words graven image. Graven means fixed. And so it's just reminding us, you're going to have ideas about God, but don't let them be reduced to one image or one idea and say that's it. Just know we have our ideas, but hopefully we can hold those loosely. The second way we experience God is the unseen, beyond us, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven. So there's a part of all of us, most people, that when we experience God, it's the mystery, it's the great out there, it's the beyond us. For some people, this God beyond us is like Santa Claus's great-great-great-grandfather, and it's this superpower man in the sky that you can't see. For other people, God beyond us is a higher reality that is beyond us and yet a part of us. And so we experience God with our ideas and our thoughts. We experience God as something beyond, greater than. The third way we experience God is through presence or spirit. If you feel the presence of love. I remember in my life at one time being in a dire place and just not knowing how to go forward or backwards or anything. And I had I just cried out, and this incredible wave of peace washed over me. This literal presence just enveloped me. And so we experience God as spirit, as presence, a loving presence. Spirit is alive and well. The fourth way we experience God is then within our own nature. How many of you believe in a higher power, a higher spirit, a Holy Spirit that is a part of your nature? We begin to experience God as not separate from us, but as a part of us. That it is God that is beating my heart. It is animating my spirit. It is God that constitutes my very being. And that I can access and commune with God. So we begin to experience God as within our own being. I would add another in that we often experience God in another. For some people, they would experience God through Jesus. Some would experience God through Kuan Yin or another avatar. Some would be able to recognize and experience God through a Mother Teresa or a Dalai Lama. Sometimes you may experience God because perhaps you have just been praying and needing something desperately, and someone knocks on your door and hands you the very thing you were needing, and you're like, wow, you just showed up as an angel of God. And we experience God as angels, people who have crossed over. And so many people experience God through other beings. And then we experience God as principle. That's probably the least talked about, and yet it's everywhere. Now, there again, don't get stuck on the word. The principle or spiritual law is like the operating system. It's what keeps the orbits in orbit. It's the same law that keeps your biology operating. The laws of the universe and your personal universe are one and the same. God is the omnipresent operating system of the universe, functioning through universal law. Seen, unseen, yet ever present. Neutral, yet precise. Impartial, yet intimate in its involvement in our lives. That this is always operating. Again, I shared last week, I went to the Grand Canyon many years ago, and I'll never forget seeing a little sign that said, "The law of gravity is strictly enforced here." Well, the gravity works no matter who you are. If I fall off of the step or fall off and into the Grand Canyon, the same law applies. You're going to fall. And it doesn't matter if I'm a 4-year-old or 104 years old. It doesn't matter if I'm a good person or a person with a lot of ill intentions in my heart. Gravity works for the same no matter. The scriptures say it rains on the just and the unjust. That what it is telling us is that there's some ways that the universe operates, God operates, and it's up to us to learn about these things and to be able to work and to operate with them. And so those laws don't play favorites. It's just about, do you understand how it works? And when you begin to understand how the laws work, you can work with them. For example, the very law of gravity says that I cannot fly across here. If I try, I'm going to hit the floor. But yet if we can harness the law of gravity and begin to access the law of aerodynamics, which birds and nature teaches us, then I can put myself in an airplane and I should be able to get up and fly. And so again, it's about learning how to harness those laws and to work with those things. And so it is in our life as well. So when we look at God as the great operating system, how we experience God, we experience it through this universal law. One of the foundational principles is what is called the law of correspondence. It's one of the easiest ways to see it. Now, the law of correspondence is also called the spiritual law of giving and receiving, or the spiritual law of sowing and reaping. Some traditions refer to it as the law of karma, which is similar to this particular law. And what the law of correspondence means is that if you plant a cucumber seed, you do not have to question what's going to grow there. You're not going to get a carrot. If you plant a cucumber seed, you're going to get a cucumber. If you plant strawberries, you're not going to walk out there and get squash, unless a little bird got a squash seed and happened to put it in there beside that, but it's a seed. So that's what simply the law of correspondence, or the law of we sow what we reap what we sow. It's a universal law. And it happens in our life, and it happens as a part of our life as a creative being. So how does it happen in our lives? Well, first of all, how many of you have ever planted anything in your life? You're working with this law because if you've planted something and it has grown, you are working with it. The ground is impartial. You do not plant a seed and it says, I am not growing that here, and throw it out and find something else. That's what we mean by impartial. The law is impartial. Whatever we put into the soil is going to carry out the law and fulfill it. So the way that then begins to reflect in our individual life is the same way. Whatever we sow, we reap. It operates within the reality of our being. Now, many of the scriptures point to this. As a man thinketh in his heart, as a person knows within their being, so are they. The seeds that we're planting in our consciousness is what we become. As above, so below. As within, so without. As the universe, so the soul. Matthew, it is done unto you as you believe. That these universal laws are always working with us and hopefully for us. There's another one that says, with whatever measure you measure, it will be measured back to you. That's from Luke chapter 6:38. And then Galatians 6 and 7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that shall he reap. The word mocked means ignored or outsmarted. It says don't deceive yourself because you can't outsmart or ignore the universal law. Whatever you plant, that is what you're going to have return unto you, whatever you sow. So our question becomes, well, how do I do that in my life? And we're going to look at some 4 ingredients today to talk about that. But the medium that each of us use, where this is taking place, is in our consciousness. Consciousness is creative, and we are creative beings. That's why the scriptures tell us that as you change your thinking, as you change your thought seeds, that which you begin to manifest in your life begins to change as well. So for us, it's about realizing that if life is consciousness, then for us, it's to be aware of what is in our consciousness and how am I tending to the seeds of thought that I want. You are a conscious being. I am a conscious being. And we hold ideas. An idea is a pattern, a potential of becoming. So when we hold thoughts and ideas and beliefs, and we germinate them in our consciousness, from the inside, as within, so without, whatever we are germinating in the reality of our inner being, we then begin to express those things because that's what we're making up in our constitution. It's the very seeds of our being. And that's what we begin to express, and through that, that's what we begin to experience. So let me tell you a true story that really illustrates the 4 ingredients, and then you're going to hear from one of you in just a moment to share a story as well. Many of you may be familiar with Reverend Edwina Gaines. She's a unity minister, and she is known for her teachings about spiritual law. The first time I heard her, she's a big personality, does not mince her words. She's from Alabama. She tells you like it is, and she challenges you to live into these things. She's just really dynamic. And I invited her to my church, and a few people were like, whoa, that lady just tried to tell us what to do. But she really invited them. So I had one particular woman in the congregation, I'm going to call her Jackie. She had attended Edwina's workshop, and it both gave her hope, and it also irritated her. Because she began to think, wait a minute, you're telling me that I need to take on another level of responsibility. And so Jackie came to me about that and said, would you work with me? This has really stirred me up, and I want to understand it. Edwene told us to prove it to ourselves, and I want to prove it. And so I said, okay, I'll work with you, Jackie. So when we met the first time, and I asked her, what is on your mind? What do you want to work with? She said, well, I do not like my job. I'm just unfulfilled. I'm undervalued. I'm not challenged. I don't like the people there. I'm pretty sure they don't like me. There's a lot about my job I just don't like, and I want to find something else. And I said, have you looked for something else? And she said, well, yes, but, and she started naming, she said, these things, they're not good enough. And then as she talked more and described some others, it was like, well, but then I'm not good enough for these other things. So let me get you straight. So you want a job, you're not happy, but you have you're not finding what you want, it doesn't feel like the right match, and you're sometimes thinking you don't have what it takes. Yes, as it turned out, she had quite a bit of self-doubt and some concern around that. And then as we talked more, I said, well, what else? And she said, well, really, I don't know that there's a lot of jobs out there for a person. And so when I continued to work with Jackie, one of the things that she really lacked in her life was genuine gratitude. Her disposition was a little more on the grouchy end of the spectrum. Let's just call it that way. And just sort of, well, it's like the glass is half empty, just a lack of gratitude. So that was the very first thing I recognized, and we talked about that and how to make it real for her. Because you can't just tell somebody, you're a grouchy person, stop doing that, be grateful. And they'd be like, okay, I'm glad somebody finally told me that. I'll just fix that right now today. No. So it's about them understanding. We had to talk about that, and I had to help her realize gratitude is a vibration. If I walk out every day and if I genuinely find things that I appreciate, if I appreciate my home and my beautiful garden, if I appreciate the talent that I see in Elaine, if I appreciate the love that I can see between other people, when I begin to genuinely appreciate these things, I'm priming my own receptivity. Because you see, when you start to appreciate raises your vibration. When I start to appreciate it, even if I may not feel like I have it in my life yet, by beginning to consciously appreciate the things that you desire, you don't even know how much good is happening because you're tuning in to that vibration, that seed, that possibility. So she began to put some work into noticing how much she was wah, 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 and then dialing that back and finding her authentic way to tap in to becoming grateful. And so she worked with that. Then the next thing we began to work with was her lack of self-confidence. And that relates to your I am. So the ingredients that we've got so far are gratitude, and now it comes down to our I am. Your I am is the foundation of your consciousness. That's why the teaching of original sin and being originally flawed and being an original outcast and being originally separated from God, in my mind, is such a harmful teaching. Because if that is the foundation of your consciousness, you're behind the 8 ball to start with. And so our I am, that establishes the container for our consciousness, so working with that. And so Jackie didn't have the education some people had. There was some things she didn't have. Well, I said, let's don't focus on that. When it comes to you, tell me about the things that you are. And she said, I'm an honest person. She said, I have a good heart. I take pride in my work. I enjoy being helpful and making a contribution. I'm dependable. I'm a problem solver. She said, I love to learn. I'm a good student. I'm willing to learn. And I do have skills and experience, years worth. And I said, let's start focusing on that. You start focusing on the things that you genuinely believe about yourself, not something you're just trying to make up. You got to connect with what you really believe that is really good about you and what you really believe about the spiritual truth about you, what we could say God believes about you. So she began to work on that as well, about her I am. So she worked on gratitude. She worked on her I am herself. The next thing she began to work on is what I call infinite potential. Because she had told me, well, there's not that many jobs available for me. And I said, there is somebody today in a chocolate factory tasting chocolate and being paid good money to do it. There are jobs out there that you and I cannot even imagine. And your business is not to have to create it. Your business is to tune into the truth that there are unlimited opportunities in this universe. You don't have to try to figure out exactly what your job's going to look like, but you need to start finding examples of how the universe has just incredible there's just potential everywhere. It's we who limit it so often. And so we talked about gratitude. We talked about herself, I am. We begin to help her tune into the truth that potential, the universe has potential for opportunities. There's things that we can't even imagine. We don't have to know how it's going to work. Our job is to open ourselves to the potential, that the seeds of possibility are available. And then the fourth thing, which is vital, is you must begin to put into circulation whatever you're trying to have in your life. It just doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. And so if a person, that's why the law of giving and receiving is essential, because in order to give something, it had to flow forth from within your being. And so I talked to her about you need to find ways, create the opportunity to find ways to put into circulation your energy, your life energy, your creativity, your time, your talent, your treasure. Put it into something by making a difference in a way that's meaningful. Well, she was a person that loved to shop at Goodwill, Salvation Army, places like that. So she decided what she was going to do was 2 days a month, 2 Saturdays a month, because she worked full time. 2 4-hour Saturdays a month, she volunteered at a Goodwill store. And that was her way of giving, she was beginning to put herself into expression. She was beginning to be of service. She was beginning to make a difference. She was beginning to feel good about the work she was doing. So can you see how these four work together? There's gratitude. There's our understanding of I am. There's realizing that we live in an infinite universe with infinite possibilities. And then there's the law of circulation, that we must express and put into circulation whatever we're wanting to circulate through our life. So she began to do that, and little by little, and now she had done all of this, that was probably 6 months, and then she started volunteering. I found it fascinating because 9 months, which is a period of gestation, after 9 months of doing this, she asked if we could meet again, and we had met several times, and she said, "You're not going to believe this." She said, "I went in to volunteer this Saturday, and there was a sign that said volunteer program director needed, full-time benefits." She said, "I applied, and I've got an interview next week. Will you pray with me that and I could just see the joy in her face. And I said, "Absolutely, we're going to do that. And what's going to happen if you don't get it?" And she paused for a moment, and she said, "Then it wasn't mine, but there's something that is." And I'm like, "Yes, you got it." And so she went, and I was so happy when I got that email. She said, "I am now the new volunteer program director at the Goodwill." And yeah, that's a powerful story, true story. That's why I do what I do. This stuff works if we work it. Jake Fisher, would you please come up? I get the opportunity to talk to many of you, and I have met with Jake a couple of times, and he has shared about himself, and he shared a story with me, and I said, Jake, would you be willing to share that with the congregation? And what was your first reply? Nope. No. But where are you, Jake? Here I am. I'm playing.
Good morning, everybody.
What was so beautiful about that, because he shared just some incredible stories and parts from his life with me. And then I said, I'd love for you to share that. He's like, no, I don't really want that attention. And I appreciated that. And I just left it. But he contacted me back and he said, you know what? How could I say no when I believe in what I'm talking about? So welcome, Jake Fisher.
Thank you. Like Darlene says, my name is Jake. I moved here almost 2 years ago, and it was because of Steve and Judy McCowan that I'm here. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Judy. I'm originally from the Midwest. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa. And believe it or not, at the age of 5, my mom put me on an eastbound train in Des Moines all by myself. That train took me to Terre Haute, Indiana, and I lived with my grandparents and my great-grandparents for 3 years. As the story goes, when I arrived, my grandpa said to Grandpa, now that baby Jake is here, we need to get us an indoor toilet and a TV. Grandpa said, we can't afford both. Pick one. She picked the TV, and nothing else mattered. And I survived. I lived in Indiana for 3 years, and then my mom came and got me. She took me to the suburbs of Chicago, where I lived with my younger brother and sister in a foster home. After that, we lived in an orphanage for 3 years, and I lived in a boys' Catholic boarding school for the first 2 years of high school, and eventually enrolled myself into a public high school. And as you can see, I survived. After graduating high school, I left home to join the Navy to see the world. I served for not quite 4 years. I'm a combat veteran, and I did 2 tours in Vietnam, and I survived. Thank you. After I was discharged, not knowing where else to go, I returned back to Chicago. Just before Christmas of 1967, and the timing couldn't have been worse. In January, I started college, and that spring, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Riots broke out, and protests escalated. I decided it would have been safer to go back in the Navy and be on a ship off the coast of Vietnam than it was in Chicago. So I dropped out of college. No kidding. But at the last minute, I changed my mind and ended up getting a job with Jewel Foods. I started out as a clerk and ended my career as a store manager. I survived that as well. I left Jewel in the late 70s and purchased several grocery stores in the western burbs of Chicago, and to be honest, at this point, I was pretty proud of all that I'd accomplished. I grew up poor, I worked hard, I did my duty, and I survived. I was happily married, I had 3 daughters, I had a nice house in the suburbs, and I owned my own businesses. I was living the dream, or so I thought. I had a problem, and I thought I knew what the problem was. I weighed 220 pounds, and I was having back issues. I was seeing a chiropractor and an acupuncture doctor, and because they couldn't solve my problem, I ended up seeing an orthopedic specialist as well. His conclusion was that I had severe scoliosis, and because of the sciatica pain I was experiencing, he recommended back surgery. I asked the doctor to give me a few days to think about it, and he agreed. But after a few days, it occurred to me that there just might be another solution to the problem. And this guy I knew by the name of Jim was the person that came to mind that I thought could solve the problem. Jim was also an orthopedic doctor, a frequent visitor to one of my stores, and you might wonder why I didn't go to see him first. Well, I'll tell you. You see, back then, I acted like a tough guy. I very seldom greeted people with a smile, and when asked, how are you, I would usually reply somewhat sarcastically, I'm just fine, thank you. But I made an appointment to see Jim, and I used a fictitious name. I didn't want him to know that I was planning to visit him, and I didn't want to interact with him in the store because I had an image to maintain. I will never forget the look on his face when he walked into the room that night. He looked at me, looked at the clipboard, and then I said, "Sorry, Jim, I just needed to talk to you. I needed to see if you're the person I can trust to help me with my back problem." He was somewhat shocked, but he sat down and said, "Do you think your back is your only problem?" I said, why are you saying that? He said, "Jake, can I be honest with you?" And so I said, "Okay." He said, "You're a mess, and you don't have a clue." "Jim, why are you saying that?" He said, "Let me ask you a few questions, okay? Just a few." And here's some of the questions he asked. When was the last time you made a new friend? When was the last time you read a good book? And when was the last time you did something or tried something new? I said, "Jim, I ain't got time for this stuff. I'm busy." Yeah, I know. Two more questions. When was the last time you did a good deed? And have you ever done one anonymously? And I said, "Give me a break. I ain't got time for this stuff." He said, "That's what I thought you'd say. Let me tell you something. Listen to me. I've told 55 people exactly what I'm telling you, and despite my pleadings and insistence, they asked me to operate. And guess what? After 55 surgeries in the past 3 years, all but 3 still have the same issues." So I said, "You must not be a very good doctor." And he said, "I'm a very good doctor, but I think I know what I'm talking about. I'm now convinced more than ever, trauma and the way that some people live their lives, it caused back problems. I started to say something stupid, but instead I said, 'Okay, Jim, something's telling me to do whatever you ask. What do I do first?' And he said, 'We're going to do something simple. I want you to do a random act of kindness, and I want you to do it anonymously.' And I said, 'You said it was going to be simple.' And he said, 'Just do it. And after you do it, I want you to ask yourself the question, how did it make me feel? Because honestly, Jake, you don't have a clue. I don't think you have any idea how the things you do and the things you say affect you and others. Call me when you're done.' He stood up, shook my hand, and he left. I sat there for 10 minutes. What in the world just happened? Why would a doctor that smart prescribe something so stupid? I left the office, and over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about what the doctor had prescribed and did nothing. One day, a few weeks later in October, on a cloudy, rainy day, I stopped at a small cafe for lunch. I sat at the counter. I ordered a bowl of soup, a biscuit, and a cup of coffee. $3. Shortly after I started eating, an older gentleman sat down next to me, to my right, and looked at what I was eating, and he told the waitress, "I'll have the same thing." We struck up a conversation, and I quickly learned that his wife of many years had died recently. He was living alone, and he was helping his son and daughter-in-law out financially because his daughter-in-law had been sick and they were struggling. Suddenly it dawned on me that this could be the moment the doctor had talked about. I got up, I quickly said goodbye. I got up and went to the counter to pay the bill. I said to the cashier, "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to do me a big favor. Here's a $10 bill. I want to pay for my lunch. I want to pay for his lunch. The $3 left over is a tip. Don't say anything to me, and don't say anything to that guy until I'm long gone. Please." She took the $10, she nodded, and said nothing. I walked out the door, down the sidewalk, and while standing at the edge of the sidewalk, in the drizzling rain, I asked myself the question, how does it feel to have done a good deed for somebody anonymously. I started to weep. They weren't tears of joy, and they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. Mm-hmm. It finally dawned on me, all those years, I worked hard, was somewhat successful, but all I had really accomplished was that I had survived. I had just survived. It felt like the burdens of my life, my entire life, were lifted from my shoulders. It was an amazing moment. I was finally free. $3. $3. I called Jim and told him what happened, and after that, he and I became close friends. He was always telling me about different books to read and different things different suggestions he made about things I should do. Within a few years after buying that man's lunch, I sold my grocery stores. I went back to college at Northwestern University in Chicago. I ran and finished the Chicago Marathon. I started a commercial real estate development business and property management company in both Chicago and Clearwater. I've never had the operation. There's more that I could share, but I promised Darlene that I would stay within the time limit she's given me. But let me finish you by telling you this. On the day of my 60th birthday, 25 years after that lunch incident, I had finally graduated college, and I was eating lunch with my new friend, Steve McCowan, sitting at base camp of Mount Everest, sitting almost on top of the world and feeling like I had arrived. While sitting there, all I could think about was how fortunate I was to have listened to Jim and that I had avoided the back surgery. I also remembered how fortunate it was to have lived with my grandparents in rural Indiana with dirt roads, covered bridges, and outhouses. And most important, I realized that after just surviving the first half of my years, I was able to live a life that I was really proud of. I was thriving. In closing, I would like to suggest that we all spend the rest of our lives looking for opportunities to do random acts of kindness. And like Mikey says, when you see it, just do it. Each time we do, ask ourselves the question, how does it make me feel? And is the world a better place for me and for them? My sincere hope is for all of us is that we will live our lives constantly, and that they will constantly be changing for the better because of what we do and what we say, and all of our lives will be better for it. I promise you. Thank you.
Would you stay just... Can we extend our gratitude and tell him we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the divinity in you? To Jake, we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the divinity in you. Thank you so much, Jake. Thank you. Melody, would you come on up? You never know who you're sitting beside in here. You'll hear more from him. What he has done and continues to do is just amazing. And so this week when we talk about, universal law, you don't realize, but that's how it works. It's about connecting with gratitude. It's about looking at yourself and being willing to work on yourself. It's about realizing that this is an infinite, incredible universe, and that we're always putting something in circulation. Why not be intentional and circulate those acts of kindness, the goodness, the things that we'd like to have moving through us and flowing back to us? I'm going to invite you to close your eyes a moment and just listen to this affirmation. I am one with the divine source and flow of life. My life is an inlet and an outlet of the one life. All that I express, all that I bring forth through myself, through my circulating, all that I have to put out, can be my offering for the greatest good. And so I will open myself to give and receive abundantly and joyfully, in harmony with unconditional love, in accordance with universal law. So I breathe in, and I breathe out, and I take in, and I give out. I let love, I let go, I release, and I know. The seat of our consciousness is our self, our I am. It is this being that enables us to live and move and have our being. It is this vessel of life with a mind and a capacity to make choices, to create. I am this conscious being. And each of us know ourselves to be certain things. Each of us believe we're capable of certain things and not. And so may we learn to offer that up and to hold it a little more lightly. For all that you are is an inlet and an outlet, a sacred vessel. You are a unit of consciousness in an infinite field of consciousness. You draw upon it and you give it shape with your thought forms, your ideas, your beliefs. And in accordance with your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs, you begin to live within that concept of reality. And so we bring mindfulness to the fact that we do this, and we begin to hold it a little more lightly. And we realize that in reality, we are held as a being of spirit, that there is a divine idea for our idea called the Christ idea, the incarnation of spirit in human form, and that we are capable of so much more. And if it were not true, we would not still be in this earthly body. And so there is no shame about not yet knowing or fulfilling or manifesting something. No, there is great joy in the realization that there is so much more that we can come to know. And so we begin to give gratitude. We recognize and celebrate the things that we appreciate. We begin to see and recognize and appreciate the things that can be, that could be, that are possible. And we begin to realize that if they exist for anyone, they can come to exist in our life in a way that is relevant to our being. And so there is no comparing. This is about expressing the fullness of our potential. As we plant and sow, the thought forms that we germinate and grow and cultivate and express, so we begin to experience. And so we ask the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of wisdom, to illuminate our minds, to help us release and cleanse those ideas that no longer serve us, that we may be vessels and seeds of light with lives that are full of generous love and gracious being. So I breathe in and I breathe out, and I take in and I give out, and I let love, I let go, I release, and I know that's the flow of life. Sing it with me. I breathe in, and I breathe out, and I take in, and I give out, and I let love, I let go, I release, and I know. Come on up, band, sing it one more time. I breathe in, and I breathe out, and I take in, and I give out, and I let love, and I let go, I release, and I know